Welcome to today's episode, the podcast where we discuss the most recent installments of a different series every show. It is Monday, October 28th. Halloween is 3 days out. I hope everybody has their costumes ready. This time of year, we always tend to do shows, horror theme-wise. Last year was The Fall of the House of Usher. In 2022, it was Interview with a Vampire. In 2021, you had Chucky coming out. 2020, Emily in Paris.
I forgot that all of those were in October. Like, Fall of the House of Usher is kind of weird to me because that feels the most recent.
Most of Mike's shows, I just call him Mike because I can't remember his last name.
Flanagan.
Yes, Mike Flanagan's shows come out in October, whether it be Blind Man or
Midnight Mass.
Club. Yeah. He's done Midnight Club and Midnight Mass. So both
that was like
were
the
right.
Same year, wasn't it? If I remember that correctly.
Yeah, but I don't know if they both came out in October. So yeah, this is Uzumaki that we're now doing. It's an anime famous. You read it. We both watched the movie.
Yep.
And then you watched the entire TV show, all
TV
4
series.
episodes,
Yep.
right? It's about a cursed town. And can I just jump into this blind? Can anybody just jump into this blind?
For the series, the first episode you can, but for the last 3, you have to read the comics to even understand remotely what's going on.
Let's talk about them separately then. We'll talk about the first episode and what you thought of that, and then the last 3 later on. Actually, I've even heard that you can divide it up as first episode, 2, 3 together, and then the 4th one alone too. So I'll hear your opinion on that. Junji Ito is the creator of the manga. He's got a pretty interesting career. I think he started off as a dental hygienist or something, and that actually played a part with the way that he was able to draw things, maybe because of all the teeth.
I also know that at the end of every volume, because there's 3 volumes of the graphic novel, he's always in an end credit scene. Like, he himself drew himself as a character. Yeah. So and it's him, I guess, playing himself.
He's had a lot of people that he considers to be paying homage to: Lovecraft, H.P. Lovecraft, Quentin Tarantino, but he's definitely carved out his own niche in Japan, and he's got a couple of cats that he's actually written his own manga about as well with his wife. So that's cool. He also, I think, got famous before Uzumaki with a I keep on wanting to say comic, but manga about a succubus girl who would keep on dying but then regenerating, and so that was called Tommy, and so that got pretty famous. And then he made Uzumaki a little bit later. It came out as a magazine first, again very much like H.P. Lovecraft. He had magazines, and then they would be bound together and become a book or a novel or whatever. So let's spend 5 minutes talking about episode 1. I've heard that it's creepy. I can tell you what some of the comments have said about it, but what are your impressions?
Well, I do want to mention after the first episode, the series had an 8.6 on IMDb.
Oh, do you want me to read all? Because I kept track. It actually had a 9 at first, and then it had an 8.8, and then it had an 8.6.
Because I'm very aware of what people think of the series, but just talking about the first episode, it looked great. It was beautiful. The cool black and white color is exactly like the novel. They captured the environment perfectly. It feels so seamless, but it's short. Also, it's the shortest episode of all 4 of them. And it seemed like they were really focusing on the first 3 issues of the comic. It felt dark. It was unnerving, but it felt like it was able to capture the horror. Like, it was a great episode. I would give it an 8.5 out of 10.
Let me read what some of the comments have said on the first episode specifically. I understand why the show took as long as it did. Do you know how long it took?
It took like 5 years.
5 years, 2019, before the pandemic. The pacing is a bit fast, but this is an incredible adaptation. My jaw dropped in the last 5 minutes. What happens in the last 5 minutes? You didn't go over anything.
Well, yeah, I mean, some of the most disturbing stuff, really. Shiuchi's dad twirling his tongue into circles, his dad twisting himself into circles also, Shiuchi's mom, who is the main character.
Right, let's re-engineer that a bit.
Yeah.
And for people who don't know anything about Uzumaki means spiral, and this town is just being controlled by a giant curse that makes everybody see spirals and get obsessed with them.
Right. And we focus on 2 different characters, Kirie and her boyfriend, Shiuchi. And really, the first episode is about what happens to Shiuchi's family.
So it's a one-off storyline that then maybe comes cross later in episode 4?
Yeah, because I mean, what happens in the graphic novel is that the spiral craze is anyone who sees a spiral, almost like Bird Box, just turns crazy, and it can be even into something as small as a straw or anything like that. Like, and then spirals start happening in the sky, and before you know it, the whole entire town has people turning into snails and people going crazy and trying to people's hair starts turning into twirling. It's crazy.
So one thing I didn't know about the movie, because it's just like that, is that in 1998, 1999, they made the movie in 2000, but it wasn't completely done. Like the manga wasn't finished.
Right. So the ending was different than the
yes. So they had to, but up until then, they tried to be very faithful to the manga, they said. And so do you think that the first episode of the anime is actually more faithful to the manga, or do you think that the movie first part of it was more faithful to the manga?
Say actually the episode is more faithful
because
to
of the
manga.
black and white nature, because of the style,
Yes.
or because of the actual plot?
For all that stuff, but also the plot, because again, it ends issue 3 and it basically goes through everything that happens in those first 3 issues really close. I'd say like 100%. Yeah.
5 years, that's how long it took. This person also said, so in the last 5 minutes, that was what grossed them out the most. The next person said the finger slicing scene is one of the goriest things that has ever been shown in anime.
Yeah.
Would you agree? Because I've seen a lot of crazy stuff.
That's what I was talking about being so disgusting when Shuichi's mom cuts off the fingertips. It was just, it made you really like twist, and it was gross. But the last 5 minutes, Okada, she's this girl who is obsessed with Shuichi. She has this huge hole. It's the poster that you see in the first scene, and it starts sucking like even people in. And
so it's like a skibbity toilet, but it's like pulling in that eyeball.
Right, and then it literally pulls her in, pulls in another person that she tricked to be there. It's got
a black
gross.
hole.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was.
I've seen it in Heroes. Like I think there was a guy who could make black holes, and at one point he makes one and then swallows himself up in it on purpose because he was just so tired of making black holes.
Sorry, it was Azami. The person that comes into her hole was Okada. But yeah, it just devours both of them. So that's what people are talking about when they say the last 5 minutes.
And they had the guy who did Hereditary and The Menu, Colin Stetson, do the score, not just for the first episode, but for the full series.
So when it comes to the score and when it comes to the series backgrounds, I think that it worked for the whole series.
When you say backgrounds, though?
The backgrounds, the animation. Because,
really? So you're crediting the last episodes for their animation, but distinctly the background.
Yes, just the backgrounds.
Okay, because what they did in the first episode with this famous director was that they did rotoscoping, which is shooting in motion capture and then drawing over it.
Oh, that's cool.
Yes, and that's why it took so long. He's actually done it before in other things he's directed. But yeah, then in episode 2, things went a little awry. Also, I wanted to point out, in case you weren't aware, that the main character, I don't remember there being a blonde in the movie, but the main character in the show is blonde, right?
Are you talking about Kirie?
Maybe. I haven't seen the show.
Kirie is kind of the main character once we get to episode 2 and onwards.
The fact that she's the only blonde, though, is paying tribute to Albert Hitchcock. And because in his movies, he, I think at one point said that blondes make the best victims because in a horrific situation, they come across, I don't know, the most scared.
Mm-hmm.
And so, then in episode 2 and 3, which the IMDb ratings are the best way to say it. So it went from a 9 to an 8.8 to an 8.6 to an 8.5 to a 7.1. And I would bet that 7.1 drop was around the time that the second episode came out. And also when the producer came out, it then went from a 7 and it's been just trickling down. It's finally at a 6.9 as of recording this today. So this is a show that was in the very high 8s, could be considered one of the best anime's first episode. Like it just led a lot of people to think this is amazing.
This is going to be one of the highest, And
then you get the Adult Swim senior vice president of anime, Jason DeMarco, coming out as producer saying that they were screwed over and that he expressed frustration that they either could have only released the first episode or warts and all release all 4 because of the timing and they didn't have the budget and
I
everything else.
I read that statement. I think that is the worst thing. That is the worst statement I've ever heard someone release. Basically saying, hey, we knew that this wasn't going to be good. We also knew the first episode was going to be, but we were just going to release the next 3 episodes, 75% of the show, even though we know that there's problems with the animation. Not only does it make it jerky, also the characters look look different. I saw that there were some articles comparing them to PS2 characters, and I think that grievance is absolutely warranted because I could see it myself. Did they do rotoscoping for episodes 2
They
through 4?
changed
Do you
the
know?
studio. They didn't have the same director. There was a lot of yeah, there's a lot of questions to that because obviously they're not going to come out with a full documentary explaining how things went wrong. I do know that Netflix surprisingly has picked it up to air it in Asia though.
Interesting.
So that's according to Screen Rant. As far as second episode, third episode plot, what happens there?
Well, we follow. I mean, the problem also with the series is just the pacing because it seemed like they were contained with the first episode into the first 3 issues. With the second episode, we start out with issue 8, then go to issue 5, 6, 7, only the beginning scenes of those, and then they just start mixing it around everywhere. Episode 2 follows Kazunori and Yoriko, 2 teenage lovers. It was one of my favorite issues of the first volume.
Why?
Because we focus on them throughout the entire issue, and that's actually pretty sad because at the end of the issue, they both spiral, become a spiral together, and then go into the ocean. It's very Romeo and Juliet because the families don't want them to be together in that sense. However, in the show, we only get them at the very beginning of the episode, and the ending, they cut out 90% of what made the issue actually good. Yeah, the relationship. And then it just seemed like they kept on trying to throw everything that they could at it. So it's not necessarily like they weren't trying, that they added anything into the story. Like even when Kirie is going into this lighthouse trying to find her brother, that's all stuff that happens in the graphic novel. That's fine, but it gave absolutely no story or no time for them to explain anything of what was going on, why it was happening.
Can you explain to me the Jack in the Box guy?
The Jack in the Box guy.
Because that was episode 2, right?
I think that was the end of episode 3.
Oh, my bad. Was he introduced in episode 2?
No, the Jack in the Box guy was very strange because I actually don't remember him that well. But he shows up at the end of episode 3. You're talking about the guy that like is able to jump on his bones or whatever?
I thought he was supposed to be like a stalker guy who then, even in death, was going to surprise her.
Was that who the guy was? I actually didn't catch it. Yeah, no, then that guy is introduced in episode 2. He's a character that like falls in love with one of the Kirie's friends and then like just keeps stalking him. But
their form of stalking is just hiding behind things and going surprise,
jumping out at people. But that's the way that is in the graphic novel.
Okay, yeah. And so he doesn't turn it, but he turns into a Jack in the Box in each one.
Yeah, and at the end of episode 3, that's when he's like jumping after them, trying to find.
What I'm saying, like episode 3, it sounds like it still had its moments. It was just very volatile, kind of like the stock market. You know, it had the ups and downs, but the animation style did not help it at all. And then followed by the pacing issues.
Well, what happens is in episode 3, because in episode 2, Kirie gets injured when she goes in a lighthouse trying to find her brother. So she wakes up in the hospital, and the first half of episode 3, I actually thought we were going to get back on track with how good it was because it seemed like it was actually creepy. The hospital storyline is one of the most memorable, I think, issues in Uzumaki because you're dealing with evil babies and people eating so much placenta that they think are mushrooms and then them turning evil.
People do eat placenta though.
No, I know, but like these are mushrooms that like people are eating and then they realize it's just placenta that's turning them evil into zombies even. And so
placenta isn't even spiral shaped though, which is
well, that's why. But it was growing from within. Like that's the thing. They were taking it from people and they were feeding it to other people. It was gross. It was disgusting. I loved it. I think again, it's probably one of the most memorable parts of Uzumaki. Whoever read the actual graphic novel, but it seemed like then, like halfway through, Kirie just leaves the hospital. And they never talk about what happened in there. There were zombies that were chasing people. There were people that were like almost dying. It was actually like horrific, but it didn't seem like the series ever really talked about what happened in the hospital again. And it does, in the graphic novel, it does have kind of a fast pace to it. Again, there's only 3 volumes, but it seemed like it actually took the time, planted the seeds, and it seemed like characters actually made choices that made sense. Here, because of the quick quick pacing and everything just being all kittywampus, the characters' decisions, the things they would talk about, didn't even make a lot of sense. Not to mention all the characters kind of exposition dumping at every single turn of the story.
So you got this main couple in Uzumaki land, and they are trying to survive what everybody can see is a crazy event that is just going to obliterate and make the town eat itself, right?
Yep.
And there's a lot of people who are just ignoring it, right?
Well,
I've seen complaints that people are saying, why couldn't a lot of these towns, why were they going about their days like nothing was happening?
That is a huge complaint because people were turning into snails. One of the students is even shown in the second episode, Katayama. He turns into a snail and no one's talking about it. They're just
go to say how like society does put on the blinders if there's trouble around you, but it's not immediately in your life.
Still, if there is a snail that is crawling up the wall of a school, I don't think that the bully, even the person who was bullying that kid, would be like, oh, look at how funny it is. They'd be like, that guy is a fucking snail.
Did anybody ever try to remove his shell when it was first starting on his back? Because that's what happened.
I think that there are some times in the episodes where they come across like just an abandoned shell, whatever happened to those characters. I think
like they had to get into a bigger one?
I think that's in like the final episode where they come across a few abandoned shells. But aside from that, no, it's like, and by episode 4, kind of like the graphic novel, the town is just in ruins. People are eating other people. It's like there's no civilization that's really happening.
Right. So that leads me to my biggest question, which is like, even The Walking Dead provides some means of hope, which is that there are survivors who are able to get out of the worst towns and find a life somewhere else, even find family members, maybe build up their own civilization elsewhere. It doesn't seem like there's any getting out of this town in any way. Like you said, the 2 lovers who turned into spirals and jumped in the ocean, that was the happiest ending that seems like anybody's getting.
Well,
what is our main character hope to achieve?
Kirie, for the last volume and for the final episode, is trying to find her parents, but even when they go down this thing called Dragonfly Pond, which is just this big hole that they end up walking down. And by the way, the last like 5 to 10 minutes of this animation, I don't know if it was something that the original studio was working on, but there was a sudden increase in the animation. Like it started to look really good.
The choppiness, the volatility of this thing, where it was like some scenes are better than the others. I've heard that in the episode 4 that they did bring back the original studio and to help with
because
things.
the ending actually looked really, really good.
Which is funny because in episode 4, that's the viral moment everybody keeps on pinning around, which is like a gif of this PNG that was just dragged as this guy falls into a hole.
There was multiple times where it felt like a PNG was just being dragged throughout the backgrounds of this thing. But Kirie ends up finding her parents. They're dead. She finds Shiuchi, who's down there, and then they spiral into each other with Kirie's narration saying that this is just a continual loop. One thing that I thought was probably the only addition that I liked that Uzumaki made in the TV series was, it's not in episode 1, but in episode 2, 3, and 4, there's an after credit sequence. And I thought those actually worked pretty well. Episode 4 showed the continual loop again, where it seems like there's always going to be some apocalyptic event because it shows Kirie and Shiuchi walking down kind of like they are this town in the first episode. And then I think it's Kirie who turns to Shiuchi and says, we should try and get out, which is something that Shiuchi says to Kirie in the first episode, showing that this repeat loop happened.
Yeah, but like they flipped the genders or something.
And I thought that was really cool. I was like, I wish that we had stuff like that.
It's a Ragnarok situation, where the gods destroy themselves only to get reborn again and then go back and do the same thing over and over again. Triangle has done it. A lot of horror films like to do that. But my question again is like, what is the hope? Where is it come from?
There is none. But that's
so you walk into the movie and you're like looking, or TV show, and you're looking for our main character to at least assemble some idea. I get that there's no cure, but the idea that there's no escape is what's truly it almost makes me not want to see it because of that.
Well, there's very little hope in this story.
So it's like, why are people reading it?
Even in the final episode, Kirie's little brother turns into a huge snail, but people are reading it because it's just such an interesting story. You want to see what happens.
People die,
yeah,
but you know what's going to happen. It's the thing. It takes away it makes it super predictable.
Well, you don't know. You don't know. You think, possibly, and this is just the way that stories work. That Kirie and Shiuchi, you're wondering if there's any way they're going to make it out because they make it to the very end of the novel. It's not
Right.
like they die. So you want to, but until the last scene where they turn and twist into each other, kind of like the couple did in issue 5 and episode 2
Mhm.
here.
Yeah, it's funny though. The second, third, and fourth episode, as much as they've been canned and people have voiced a lot of upset feelings about them, it's only they're in like the mid sixes.
I actually didn't mind episode 4. I thought that I was going to jump on it because episode 2, they rushed the pacing too much. I give it a 3 out of 10. I thought it looked worse. The characters looked cleaner, which might sound like a compliment, but it's not. Episode 3, I really like the first half with the hospital because I thought that they captured the tone well, but then the last half just made no sense with all the disasters happening. 4 out of 10. And then episode 4, I thought that they kind of actually stayed more closely related to the graphic novel than I thought they were going to. 6 out of 10. So
6 out of 10.
that's how I would kind of
So you're
grade.
still saying it's worth watching?
I would say the last episode is, yeah.
Huh. Okay, I was gonna say it's not the worst anime because Rick and Morty, the anime, has 4s and 5s when it comes to its episode ratings, compared to the 6s for episode 2 and 3 of Uzumaki. Then also, I have a few comparisons that I wanted to see if you thought that they were related. The Last Jedi. So remember when J.J. Abrams took over Star Wars and then that came out and everybody was like, "Oh, this is amazing." And
Everyone loved the 7th one, yeah.
there was a little bit of a few people, including myself, who was like, this just feels like a retread. I'm not seeing what's so special about this, right?
I always say episode 7 for Star Wars had rose-tinted glasses. Episode 8 made people take the rose-tinted glasses off. And then
Yes.
episode 9 made people go, this is awful.
But by the end of Star Wars, it was like those final episodes made it obvious that episode 7 was just kind of a placeholder. And it made it worse for that, I think. Like,
Right.
people don't rewatch that anymore and think fondly of it. Did the warts that this Jacob guy is talking about that existed in episode 2, 3, and 4 make the first episode, which was considered so amazing when it first came out, worse?
I don't think so. I think that the first episode can kind of stand on its own as its own thing, but there is a lot in episode 2, 3, and 4 where, like I said, if you haven't read the graphic novel, you're going to be lost. Like, Kirie's hair and this other student's hair, Sakino's, like, they fight. They end up having like a wrestling match, and it sounds incredibly stupid if you don't know what's actually going on. In the graphic novel, it took the time to explain that that like hair they were turning into curls, and it was like actually explained what was happening. But here in the story, in the TV series, it was just like they're having a boxing match, and I'm sure to any new viewer, they'd be like, "What is going on right now? Why are these hairs fighting?"
I would say that the live action movie, which also did the hair thing,
Yeah.
where it was able to move on its own and stuff, like like there were tentacles, that was also pretty weird too. Telltale's The Walking Dead was another one I wanted to compare
Where season 1 was liked, and
where season 1 was amazing, and then the hubris is what killed the company. It got too big too fast. This one, people are like, how did this take 5 years? You know?
That's the main question.
It's like you
How
had
did-
the time.
And that's why I was so mad at what the producer or whoever said we wanted to make it by the time that the release date came. You had 5 years to do this. Why did you need that much time? You literally could have taken a year for each episode and made this amazing. You could have had that 9 on IMDb that you originally had. What was the problem here? What went so wrong?
Yeah. Or, as most people have pointed out, just release the first episode, that first option that you wanted to do, leave it at that. Let the fandom really just make it a big
And
deal.
that would make complete sense because Adult Swim every single year always has those test pilots, right? And that's why Smiling Friends was able to make it its full series. This absolutely would have gotten people excited and probably would have given you more funding. I feel like for this show to have really worked, it should, and I understand that would have had to take more time and probably would have been more expensive. It needed between 6 to 10 episodes at least to really make the story make sense. The first episode was good. I didn't hate the 4th episode, but overall, I will give this series a 5 out of 10.
I thought you just said 6 out of 10.
I gave episode 4 a 6 out of 10.
Okay. I've
but
been
I'm
arguing
saying
that the whole time.
I'm saying with episodes 2 and
Gotcha.
3, they are so bad, even to someone who's read the graphic novel, that it definitely takes away from the whole series.
Fine. All right. So Silent Hill, Salem's Lot, Uzumaki, what do they all have in common?
Well, they're horror.
Cursed towns that everything gets decimated. Right?
Yeah.
Like, and whether or not there's like a couple survivors, I'll let that go. But like, usually it just means the town is dead meat. and you
Yeah.
watch the entire story from that happening. 5 years it's taken for this show to be made. It's taken even longer for the next Skyrim game to come out. Just put some perspective on it. Wolverine Origins also kind of reminded me of this, not because of the first episode, but releasing the content before it's fully fleshed out. Like, these could have been decent if the editing was a little bit different, and then they had that's a good question. So second, third, and fourth episode, had it been as good studio wise, making the style and
In terms of the animation,
and
had
the
it been,
rotoscoping and all
yes.
that, but the pacing issues still existed, where would it have fallen then? Just somewhere in the middle?
I think it probably would have fallen, at least using just IMDb terms, probably high sevens, because I think people just wanted to see the good animation.
They would have avoided the pacing.
Yes.
They would have just been like, that's fine.
I mean, I think you would have had definitely some sticklers, and probably even me be like, this didn't make as much sense, but you would enjoy seeing the animation so much, seeing how good it was, that I don't think people would have cared as much.
All right.
You know?
Are the snails safe in the town though? Like, once you become a snail, are you then allowed to live your life as a happy little snail?
I think so, but
Cool.
the process is
So
so
that's-
gross. You get spirals on your back, and then you just see it grow.
Between that and death, I don't know. I mean, it's
seeing the eyes pop out of the head, especially when it was Kirie's brother, that made me go, you know what? I might just take the bullet at that point.
Oh, so there were people who just killed themselves, right?
I didn't see anyone. No.
Okay, I thought in the movie that one of them had put themselves into like a washer and then like turned on the washer, the spin cycle or something, because he was.
I think in the first episode you see the dad twisted himself into this tub.
Yes.
And that might be who you're referring to, but that was in the first episode. Again, it seems like Shiuchi just had the worst out of all of them, because he ends up turning crazy later on in the series. He loses his parents in the first episode. It's crazy.
So the last question will be Hysteria, Teacup, Uzumaki. Let's leave it to the first episode of Uzumaki. Rank them scary least to worst.
Oh, Uzumaki without a doubt. First, I'd say
as least or most?
As most.
Most scary.
I'd say Teacup would probably be second, and then Hysteria would be third.
At first, I was thinking maybe Hysteria with the mom scene at the very end, but Teacup had the almost like Uzumaki, instead of something becoming a wormhole where it kind of flushed in on itself, you watched the body turn inside out.
Yeah, right, so, outside the line.
Yeah, I wonder what next year's October Halloween shows will bring. Next in line we'll do Before, but I think that'll bring us to the end of this episode. Thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode. I hope you enjoyed this one. Bye.
Bye.